Recently, I shared 5 of my favorite essential borders suitable for almost any project. And today I want to share 5 more that are amazing go-to borders that give a beautiful finish to almost any project. What I especially love about these ones are that they are easier than they look and can be adapted to any stitch count, meaning you can fudge these around a little bit to make them work. So in no particular order, let's dive right in. Now for all of these, I do recommend that you first add a round or row of single crochets to serve as your foundation. This is a great idea when working any kind of border or edging because it gives you more even stitches to work into. So if you're not familiar with how to do that, I do go into detail about it in my first video about borders, but essentially you're just wanting to focus on single crochets in each stitch, being sure to add 3 single crochets in your corners, and you can either do 3 single crochets or a single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. You just want to make sure you have at least 3 stitches to work into. One thing I do want to clarify here is that you'll be seeing me doing these tutorials on granny square samples. That does not mean that they're only suitable for working around granny squares. I'm just doing it like this because it's going to save me time because I have a lot that I want to show you. Let's start with the ever so popular scalloped edge or shell stitch border. To begin, fasten on wherever you like. You can begin either with a slip stitch or a single crochet. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using slip stitches. Next, skip 1 stitch and in the following stitch add 5 double crochets. Skip a stitch and then add a slip stitch into the next stitch. Again, you can use a single crochet if you prefer. Skip a stitch and then add 5 double crochets into the following stitch. Skip 1 stitch and add a slip stitch into the following stitch. I'm at a corner, I'm going to skip a stitch and then into the chain 1 space or the middle of this corner, I'm going to add my 5 double crochets. Now, I got really lucky with this. This doesn't always happen. If you want your shell to be dead center in that corner, then you can miss a stitch or skip over a couple of stitches to get to that corner. Just play around with this and see what you like best. But even if you don't get into that corner completely, it doesn't matter. It's still going to be really pretty when it's all completed. And you'll see that when we finish this. Skipping 1, working into the center with 5 doubles. Skip a stitch and then work your slip stitch into the following stitch. And you're just going to continue this all the way around. When you come to the end, most likely everything's not going to line up perfectly. You're going to need your eye and your judgment as your guide here. There really isn't enough room for me to add another scallop. That's not going to look good, and it's going to pull a little bit tight for me to get here to do another slip stitch to complete this row. So what I'm going to try is adding another double crochet just to help it spread a little bit more, just to help me get over to that other slip stitch in the beginning of the round. And I'm satisfied with that. If I was working on a big blanket, no one would even notice that there's 1 extra double crochet in this scallop. So this is how it looks if you do fudge things around and try to fit into the corners. And here's how it would look if you just went around with the sequins. I think it looks just as pretty not trying to get into those corners. So now that you're familiar with how to do the scalloped edge, let's take it 1 step further and do a rolling scalloped edge. Fasten on wherever you like best with a slip stitch. This is another one where your shells will not sit perfectly in the corners, and for this one we're not even going to worry about that. We're just going to work the sequence all the way around. Fasten on wherever you like best with a slip stitch and then a chain 3. Now to get this rolling effect, or how everything's kind of folding on top of each other, we're going to work backwards and then forwards. The magic number that you want to remember for this tutorial is the number 3. To begin, we're going to go backwards. We're going to skip 2 stitches and then work a slip stitch into the 3rd stitch. Chain 3, and then work 6 double crochets into the chain space. That first chain 3 is going to serve as a double crochet, so you'll have 7 double crochets in total. To anchor this down, skip 2 stitches and then add a slip stitch into the 3rd stitch. Chain 3. And now we're going to go backwards again, and we're doing a slip stitch into the 3rd stitch. And this is very easy to see because we actually already worked in that 3rd stitch. So you're just going to go in there. And create a slip stitch. Chain 3 and add 6 double crochets into the chain space. Skip 2 and then in the 3rd stitch add a slip stitch. Chain 3, go backwards, skipping 2 stitches and working a slip stitch into the 3rd stitch. And again, it's very easy to recognize because you've already worked into it. Chain 3, 6 double crochets into the chain space. We've reached the corner here and we're not going to do anything different. We're just going to continue on with that same sequence. We're not going to worry about trying to fit it into that corner. So I'm in my corner, I'm skipping 2 stitches, working a slip stitch in the 3rd, chain 3, adding a slip stitch into the 3rd stitch, the same one that I already worked into, and continuing on with the sequence. Chaining 3 with 6 double crochets into the chain space. Skipping 2, slip stitch into the 3rd, chain 3. And you're just going to continue this all the way around. Once you've gone all the way around, you may find that everything doesn't line up perfectly when you come back to the very beginning. Don't worry about that. You can fudge this to make it work. Regardless of how many stitches you have left, your goal here is to add a slip stitch into the same space where you began. Now clearly I don't have 2 stitches to skip here. I'm just going to go right in with my slip stitch. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to do my last fan stitch. To complete this, we want to skip our 2 stitches and then do a slip stitch into the 3rd stitch. But that's really tricky to do because we have a completed shell right here. So what I recommend you do here is work from behind. Cut yourself a generous tail, pull the loop through to the back, and then take your tail and pull it through that loop. And then what you can do here is weave it in however you like best, but I'm just going to double knot the beginning tail with the last tail and then weave those in. But look how gorgeous this is. Because we're using so many double crochets, it gives you plenty of room to get around those corners. If you're finding that this is not laying flat for you, then I would recommend when you get to your corners to just mix it up a little bit. Instead of skipping 2 stitches, then just skip 1 before you do your slip stitch. That'll bring your fans closer together and should give you a little bit more expansion here to get around those corners. Next, let's work on something really delicate and lacy. I'm going to use a cream color here. Hopefully you'll be able to see it clearly on camera. To begin, start in a corner. I've already done my round of single crochet, so I have 3 stitches here in the corner. Just go into that center stitch and create a slip stitch. Now, super easy. We're just going to go all the way around with a chain 3 and a slip stitch, skipping 1 stitch in between. So chain 3, skip 1, slip stitch into the following stitch, chain 3, skip 1, slip stitch in the following stitch. You're just going to continue this all the way around. When you come to a corner, you're not going to worry about it. You're just going to continue on with the sequence. When you come to the end, you do want to see 1 remaining stitch. I actually have 2. Don't worry about it. You can just do like I'm going to do and skip over it. But instead of doing a chain 3, you just want to do a chain 1 for that final segment. And then into the very beginning stitch, we're going to do a half double crochet. And now you're ready for round 2. Chain 3. And work a slip stitch into the first chain space. Chain 3, slip stitch into the chain space. And you're just going to continue this all the way around. A chain 3, slip stitch into the chain space. Again, we're not worrying about the corners. We're just going to continue on with the sequence. When you come to the end, chain 3, add a slip stitch into that final available chain space, and then another slip stitch into that half double crochet that you made. And then what I like to do is just weave down to the beginning tail, and then tie those ends together. And then weave those in. And now the picot stitch. This is such a versatile stitch, so easy to do. You can either use it as a standalone border, or you can add it to an existing border just to give it a little extra oomph. For this stitch, we're going to start with 2 single crochets, so fasten on wherever you like. I'm doing a standing single crochet, so I have a slip knot on my hook, going into a stitch, yarning over and pulling through the 2 loops to create a single crochet. So that's 1, and now we do a second. To make our picot, we're going to chain 3. Then next, add a slip stitch into the top front loop of your single crochet stitch. Right here, it's sort of to an angle. And we're just going to continue this sequence. 2 single crochets, chain 3, slip stitch into the top front bar of your single crochet. 2 singles, chain 3, slip stitch. I'm coming near a corner, but I would recommend that you continue on with the same sequence of 2 single crochets and your picot, because when it's all completed, it's going to look really nice. Now, if you really want that picot to be dead center in your corner, you can manipulate things to make that happen. You'll just have to play around with it to just make sure that everything looks nice and consistent all the way around. I'm nearing the end here. And I have 2 remaining stitches. That works out really well because I can do 1 final picot here on the side to make everything look really uniform. If things don't line up well for you, then just play around with it. You might need to add an extra picot in there or just have an extra space. Just do whatever looks best. And here in my very first stitch, I'm going to go ahead and do a slip stitch to complete the round. Or if you don't want to have a big knot in the front, snip your work, pull the yarn through, and pull that strand through to the back. And then tie the ends together. And then weave in your tails. If you want these to be more spaced out, then just do more single crochets in between. If you want your picots to be taller, then just add extra chains. You can play around with this and just do whatever you like. And for this final one, I'm going to call it the 2-in-1 stitch because it looks like you've done 2 rounds, but you've only done 1. It's really cool. As you're working on it, it feels like you're doing a slip stitch and a single crochet at the same time. You can start wherever you like, but this time I am going to start in a corner and I'm going to do a standing single crochet. I have a slip knot on my hook. I'm going in, pulling the yarn through, pulling the yarn through 2, and that's my standing single crochet. To work this stitch, we're going to first work into this side post here. Here's our single crochet. We have the top post or the top of the single crochet and then this side post here, and we want to work into the side. So you're going to take your crochet hook, go into the side post, go into the next available stitch, and pull your yarn through. Pull the loop on your hook through the one next to it. You have 2 loops on your hook. Now yarn over and pull through 2. And that's your stitch made. And we're just going to continue this all the way around. So working into the sidebar, going into the next stitch, pull your yarn through, slip stitch into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through 2. Sidebar, into the stitch, pull your yarn through, slip stitch 1, yarn over, and pull through 2. And you're just going to continue this all the way around. When you come to a corner, you're going to do 3 of these to stay consistent with your corner. Now I have a chain space here, so I'm just going to work into the chain space instead of the stitch. If you're finding that it isn't laying nice and flat for you, then I would recommend that you just loosen up your tension as you're working around those corners. This is a stitch that you can easily get tight with, so be careful with that. And that's because of that slip stitch effect that you're making. And now to complete this stitch, I'm just going to do a slip stitch into the very first stitch that I made. Or if you don't want that bar in front, like I've been showing in the previous tutorials, take your strand of yarn and go into the top of the very first stitch that you made. And then tie the 2 tails together. And then weave in your ends. I just love this one so much. It's subtle but effective. Well, I hope you enjoyed these borders as much as I did. Let me know which one is your favorite. And if you missed that very first video that I mentioned in the beginning, be sure to check it out because there's a lot of goodies in there too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.